One of the highlights of OPPO's Reno series has always been the camera system. It has been calling itself the portrait expert for some time now, and with the addition of a telephoto lens a few years back, that message is even stronger. But these days, there are a lot of telephoto shooters, a lot of portrait cameras now available, which I'm sure makes you wonder if the OPPO Reno12 Pro is keeping up. Well, that's what we're exploring today in this camera review, so let's start with some specs. The OPPO Reno12 features a quad camera system that looks similar to the Reno11 on paper. It's led by a 50-megapixel main camera like last year, but now has a Sony LYT600 sensor instead. It's also equipped with both optical and electronic image stabilization. We then have another 50-megapixel shooter telephoto this time, and still with 2x optical zoom. Rounding out the rear camera setup is an 8-megapixel ultra-wide. The rear cameras support 4K video recording up to 30 FPS except when using the wide-angle camera. Up front, we also have another 50-megapixel shooter for your selfies. When it comes to capturing portraits, the Reno12 has always called itself an expert, and it shows in situations like these where you can control light. While megapixel counts are kind of similar from last year's devices, we do have the new Sony LYT600 sensor, which puts a focus on post-processing, specifically depth mapping and focus adjustment. Now, considering that the OPPO Reno12 Pro or the OPPO Reno12 series in general is AI focused, I believe the Sony LYT600 sensor should be a good partner for it. I find that the Reno12 Pro effectively balances darks and lights in controlled situations. With AI on its side, the Reno12 Pro still excels in producing great skin tone and texture like its predecessors. Its beautification, when set properly, offers a natural enough cleanup of skin and features, so you won't really have to bother too much in post-production. Though there are times you get a whiff of that over-sharpening on the facial features. If you're out and about with no controlled light with you, the Reno12 Pro is still a capable run-and-gun portrait shooter. It does have a slight issue with dynamic range, which we'll talk about later on in the video. Focusing on a portrait mode for now, it works well both at 1x and 2x, but as always, I would suggest that optical 2x zoom for a more classic portrait frame and of course to get that background compression and even better bokeh. Now, in terms of background separation, you will be dealing with the same issue from previous devices. It can look very artificial when dialed up, especially when you're using 1x or the main camera. Luckily, the Reno12 Pro does let you adjust bokeh post-capture. It still has an interval timer, which I appreciate, especially when I'm shooting alone. It just keeps me from going back and forth and focusing on the photo instead. Also, it's just the perfect fit check feature. Where it struggles, unsurprisingly, is still getting that perfect cutout for curly hair or in scenarios with busier backgrounds. In all honesty, I do find the camera upgrades for the Reno12 Pro a little bit underwhelming this year, but that doesn't really take away from the performance of the cameras themselves. They do perform still really well in and outside of a professional setup, a pro setup. But I do have one complaint, and this is something not new. I said this last year as well. We still don't have RAW support when you're shooting in a pro mode. I just find it a little limiting, especially since it's a pro camera. You'd want that RAW image so you could post-process later on, or maybe it's just me. I just really love editing my photos. So please, OPPO, bring back RAW files for the Reno series. Outside of portrait photography, the OPPO Reno12 is a versatile camera system, but it's not without its weaknesses. In general, photos come out with sharp details and vibrant colors, though it does oversaturate the greens and reds in my opinion. But apart from that, the hardware and the software seem to work harmoniously enough for the camera to distinguish scenes quite quickly. At 1x, details remain sharp across the frame, but also has hardware-induced bokeh when taking shots up close. Switching over to the telephoto lens and that 2x optical zoom, you can put your subjects in much better focus, portrait or not. You also have 5x digital zoom that crops from the 2x image, which does make the quality a little bit better, but not entirely reliable, making zoom performance not really this phone's strong suit. In bright light, the shutter speed is fast enough for those quick snaps, but if you are dealing with skittish subjects like pets, the live photo feature adds an extra layer of usability since you can choose the frame that you want to keep.
So let me quickly talk about dynamic range for a second. Now, the OPPO Reno12 Pro generally has a wide enough dynamic range to be an all-scenario type of camera, though there were instances that it had a hard time exposing a very bright sky. And this is even more evident when you switch to ultra-wide, because the dynamic range is obviously narrower this time around using this lens, and it's even harder to capture high-key or high-contrast scenes. Now, in low light, the OPPO Reno12 Pro's cameras is a hit and miss, again, in my opinion. Sometimes it's able to balance it out quite effectively, that you get the right details without too much noise, and it looks like a very nice photo, a very nice low light photo. But then again, there are times that the processing just kicks in way too much and it looks too oversaturated, too over-sharpened, and there's just noise in places that you wouldn't expect.
When it comes down to it, it does take a bit more adjusting before snapping to really get that perfect low light shot. The Reno12 Pro's main camera is equipped with dual stabilization that keeps video stable when you're shooting and moving. Opting for software stabilization does add more fluidity, but at the cost of resolution. You'll max out at 1080p, which is perfect enough for reels and shorts and stuff like that.
This might not come as a surprise, but video really isn't the strong suit of the OPPO Reno12 Pro. I myself personally do find it a little processed. There's a lot of sharpening going on, a lot of oversaturation that I find the need to process them myself first before I actually post them on my social accounts or on the Modern Creatures social accounts. But if you're not nitpicky like me, then I do believe that these videos are of good quality and they are good enough for things like TikTok, Instagram Reels, or Stories, but maybe not for shooting a full YouTube video.
Finally, I'm just gonna gloss over the selfie camera because, as you may have noticed from my other videos, it's not really my favorite lens to use. But generally, you're adopting a lot of the characteristics of the main camera: vibrant color, good skin texture, but of course, in bright light. Again, switch over to darker environments and you're left with muddier details, both for the face and the background. For video, you can record up to 4K, which is always appreciated, and you can get software stabilization as well with the same compromise in resolution.
Before we wrap things up here, we have one more thing to talk about, and it's a big deal for the OPPO Reno12 series, so we have to talk about it just a little bit. It's AI. Now, the OPPO Reno12 Pro does have a bunch of AI features to help you with everyday tasks. We have a video if you want to see some of it at work, but on the photography side, for the photography AI features, we have things like AI Best Face, which quite literally helps you get the best face by analyzing the photo. So for example, someone has their eyes closed in a photo, AI will work to fix that. We also have AI Clear Face, which is responsible for those advanced touch-ups or those advanced beautification.
But I suppose my favorite, and something I've highly integrated into my workflow, is using the Reno12 Pro's AI Eraser 2.0.
I've tested a couple of AI erasers. I've tested Honors, I've tested Google's, I've tested Realme's. I haven't tested Samsung, so I have no comparison with that one, but in general, with the ones that I have tried out, OPPO's AI Eraser 2.0 is more reliable because of two things: convenience and accuracy.
I find that OPPO's Eraser 2.0 is more effective in removing and recreating the original scene rather than just generating something new. Of course, it's not always 100%, but it has been one of the more dependable ones. We're almost at the end, so let's go back to the big picture. What do we think about the OPPO Reno12 Pro's cameras?
It's a versatile system, definitely, and something you can use in and out of a professional setting if that's what your work dictates. But of course, it's more than enough for those everyday snaps and even good enough for casual content creation. Yes, the upgrades are pretty minor and there's nothing really hype-worthy or anything like that, but what you're getting with the OPPO Reno12 Pro is a camera system you'd expect for a phone in this segment. It's versatile, it's powerful, and it's got all those AI features to help you with your workflow.
In the end, the OPPO Reno12 Pro continues to excel in what it promises: a reliable portrait photography tool with AI-driven features that really can improve your workflow. While the camera hardware upgrades are modest, its overall performance proved that it can still hold its own for casual users and content creators alike.